Welcome to Complete Edition, the podcast between a PlayStation Trophy Hunter and an Xbox Achievement Hunter. This is episode 22. I'm your host, Compulsive Nerd, and I am joined by my co-host, AJ. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing well. The exciting gaming times have arrived.
That's right, dude.
Since
It's
last
so
time.
awesome. Oh my god. I've been having a great time gaming the past 2 weeks, and I kind of was in a slump before this, you know? I was like, I'm just waiting for Horizon, and I'm like, I don't want to start this game, and I don't want to start that game. So I was kind of just casually playing games, and I'm going to have to go back and clean up my trophies at a different time, but the games are coming out, dude. Jesus Christ. Sifu is out. Horizon is out. Elden Ring is out. Things are happening, and it's just like, it is chaos out there. I love it. I do love it.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you been up to?
Not much. Other than I don't know. Things have been like wrapping up at my work at the moment, and I'm moving to a new city, so it was like finalizing all of that stuff. And I managed to find like a place that I'm pretty happy with. So just sort of like, I don't know, kind of like logistical things outside of gaming, really. But everything's going well on all those fronts. And yeah, it's I've got like some time now to put aside for gaming as well, which is awesome. Just to have like everything sorted out in front of you, and then being able to just do like whatever. I'm excited about. As we're recording this, the reviews for the Batman just dropped,
Oh,
and they seem to be pretty positive as well. So I want to go down to the cinema to see that as well. So it's just good times,
dude,
right
that's
now.
so awesome that you mentioned that Batman, because last night I went to see Uncharted in theaters, and man, I was expecting to hate that movie because like I just think that video game movies are fucking terrible. They're just fucking terrible, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed it so much that when the post-credit scene rolled, I was like, I cannot wait for the next movie. I cannot wait for the next movie. I'm very excited for the next movie. I'm like, that's exactly what I want them to do. I want them to take this IP and then just make it to where it fits in a movie like setting, and they didn't like, I don't feel like Sully and Nate are the exact same as the video games, but they're tailored towards the actors, which I think is way better. And like I just really, really appreciate that. So yeah, I've been doing that, and I got, just like you said, a lot of stuff outside of gaming. I'm like, I got taxes done, so I don't have that on my plate anymore. Like, I'm getting a bunch of logistical stuff, like trying to get like my tires rotated this week, and like just trying to get stuff done. Just get it done so that I can just sit down and game, and that's like all I want to do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
In terms of Uncharted, yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I'm going to see it, but it was like the critics were giving it sort of like 2 out of 5 and 3 out of 5. So the critics seemed sort of split whether they thought it was like, okay but not brilliant, or pretty good but not amazing. Sort of seemed to be, you know, on that sort of consensus, and then the audience score is a lot higher. And I think the director is like the same director as Venom or something, or was associated with the project. And Venom had like a similar cycle where like critics saw it and didn't like it, and then audiences did quite like it. It's interesting when that happens with a film. But in terms of, for me, it's like I usually tend to agree with critics because maybe, I don't know, I'm not like a general audience consumer of films necessarily. I don't know, just the way I usually tend to like sort of, I don't know, more like artsy films than popcorn crowd pleasers in that sense. But I'm glad people are really enjoying it more than the reviews suggested. Because if you've got a choice between something being good and something being bad, obviously you always just want it to be good. So it's nice to see people responding sort of better to it in terms of the audiences than the critics were.
right. And that's actually something that I wanted to mention is like, I think the critics are right. Like the ones who score it lower. Like, this isn't a movie that is going to win, awards. It's not like some artsy piece. It's just a fun popcorn flick. And I think that that's okay, but it's not a bad fun popcorn flick, which is what a lot of video game movies are.
Yeah, definitely. I think
They're
for me,
so fucking awful.
like for me as like I'm happy people are happy with it, but for me as someone who was like considering going to see it, I kind of wanted it to be either like amazing, like great, like a really great movie, or such like a disaster that like you watch it like ironically to like laugh at it, like it's like so bad and so like far away from what the series is meant to be that you just sort of have to see it as like a train crash. And and from the reviews and the audience, it seems like neither happened, in the sense that it's like a fun ride but not necessarily like a top 10 movie all time, or like top 50, or like a thing that you'll necessarily remember or like want to see over and over, apart from its association with the video game franchise. And that seems to be sort of the line that even the critics that like it and the audience that like it, they seem to be saying what you're saying, where it's like it's a fun ride, but you're not going to necessarily take a ton out of it that you wouldn't take out of the games, for example, because the games are obviously really fantastic.
They really are fantastic. And dude, I'm gonna rant here a little bit, but like I used to be like, I don't want movie theaters to die. I don't care. I don't want that. I really I'm timid, and I just want this to continue. And then last night I was like, I fucking hate movie theaters. I fucking hate them. It's like, in today's society, dude, people can't put their phone down for a fucking hour and a half. And it's like, it's getting ridiculous.
Oh,
like, there was a dude in front of me who was texting, and there was a dude that was behind me that answered a fucking phone call during the movie. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you can't just like enjoy this film, like put your phone on silent and just fucking turn it off for 2 seconds. Like it. And then there was like children in front of me, and I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, I can't wait for this movie to come out and I'm just going to watch it at home because this sucks. Like, this absolutely sucks. I was like, just fucking die, movie theaters. It's over.
That guy's a Chad. I don't think I've ever seen a guy answer a phone call in the middle of a movie. Yeah, I was thinking when you were like winding up to this rant, I was thinking like I can totally empathize, where it's like 95% of the time I'm like, movie theaters are awesome, the cinema's great, and then there's that one time where your experience is just totally ruined by like people in front of you just talking the whole way, or like on their phones all the time, like being like super distracting. And it's like that, or like like a baby crying or something, like inexplicably. Just
there were babies talking annoying in front of me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm like, I kid. The whole experience was like, I kept getting taken out of the movie, and I was having such a good time with the movie that like even the bad movie theater experience wasn't ruined, like didn't ruin the movie, which is good. But man, there was so many problems and things happening, and I'm like, I just can't.
Yeah, I don't know if we've
myself in this.
I don't know if we've talked about it before, but something that's been weird to me, because I'd say like the UK and the US are like pretty close in terms of culture and society and stuff. Like that we're not that different, or there's certain things, but for the most part, like we consume pretty much the same media and films and games, and that there are definitely differences, obviously. But one that is striking to me is there seems to be like a different culture around going to the cinema to some extent, which is odd, in that you see like Americans like react to like epic moments in films. At least it seems to like happen more, whereas in the UK, like I don't know if everyone's just like miserable or whatever, but people will be silent in a film. Like almost always people are silent. Like I think I've only had one time where people have been like noisy, and people never seem to like react to anything. And I know there's obviously super fans like of stuff everywhere, of like Marvel movies and stuff, but I feel like it seems to be, from social media and from people talking about their experiences, it seems to be more common for people to be sort of noisier during a film in the US.
Absolutely. They're very expressive. Like if a superhero is like coming back to win the day, there's cheering and clapping, and like it's very expressive. But this is usually generally on like the release day and like that first couple of days, which I don't think Uncharted released that long ago. And this is where like I think that I might have interrupted you. I'm going to start putting like chats in this. This is awesome. I can remember my thoughts easier that way. I noticed that because I saw Uncharted a couple days after, that's when the movie theater experience is over. If you go a couple days after launch, people are relaxed. People have their phones out. People have their children. People are doing whatever the fuck they want in the theater because it wasn't that full. it wasn't that full, so they're just like, whatever. I can ruin other people's experience because it's not that many people. But whenever it's
Right.
like whenever the seats are packed, everyone is respectful of the rules, and it's just like so much better. Like you
Yeah,
will
that's
hear
it.
people
That's
shush people because it's like, don't talk, everybody else is fucking here, and you're being loud. It's like, okay, yeah, but whenever there's no one around, it's like, oh, we're just gonna talk a normal fucking, whatever volume we want. And I'm like, God, dude, I can hear every word you're saying, and you're 4 rows away from me. Like, it's ridiculous. It just is. I hate the movie theater experience, and I didn't go see Spider-Man. I actually am waiting for Spider-Man because I was like, I just don't want to deal with that. And
Yeah, here people seem to treat it more like basically like a library, if you can believe it, in terms of when people go to sit, both on like opening day and any other day. Like if you get someone being like noisy or annoying, it's like just it'll be like one rogue asshole like once every like 100 showings or something. So yeah, it's usually sort of I don't know, less risky to go to the cinema, I guess, in the UK to some extent. And I know people like there's a lot of people that really like that like atmosphere and like vibe of like people cheering and stuff, and I can get that. But for me it was like when I first heard about stuff like that happening, it seemed so like foreign to me to some extent because people just treat it differently here.
yeah, I definitely agree with you. It was definitely weird for me the first time I experienced it. And it kind of came about during like the Marvel boom, like the Marvel era boom, where when you go see those Marvel movies live, it's just like so rowdy. People are dressed up, dude. It's like completely different. Like cosplays happening, people are cheering, like it's going crazy. And I remember like, wow, I remember sitting there. I don't remember what movie it was. It might have been like Thor or something, but I just remember sitting there and I hear people cheering around me and I'm like, this is so weird. This is not how movies normally are. And then I got in. I got excited. And like it feels good when you get excited and you can just let it out. And it's like it's with the crowd, it's with the whole thing. It's a total experience. It totally is. And like it's really cool. And it doesn't take away from it actually might add to the theater experience, but I think that it's really cool to still like hold on to those library traditions of like respect the movie and be quiet a little, you know?
Yeah, I think yeah, for me I've never like I wouldn't say as well. I feel like my barrier to like get like super excited by what I'm seeing feels like it's too high where like a Marvel movie almost never will trigger it, I guess. Like some but I get that like those types of films specifically are like so crowd pleasing and people are like already fans of like the characters and the comic books and the actors and like all of that like all combines and then there's an epic moment. So I get it. Actually, I've had like the opposite where like I want people to react more in when I go to, and this happens very rarely, if I go to see a horror film at the cinema, I want people to like scream and gasp because I think that's quite entertaining and funny to just like imagine someone like so immersed in like a scary movie that they actually like start freaking out. But
They throw
that's
popcorn.
yeah, it's never happened. Yeah, exactly. I want someone to like make a scene and like embarrass themselves in terms of yeah, like throw their drink in the air or whatever because they're so
Yeah.
spooked. But I went to see like Jigsaw, and that movie sucks. Like it's pretty bad and also not very scary. And then I saw Midsummer as well, which was fantastic. But yeah, it's like that's the only case where like I want people to be noisy, and I don't know if that makes me an asshole because I want to see someone essentially
Suffering.
embarrassing themselves and suffering. Yeah, but you know, but actually, you know, I guess like obviously when you see a horror film, you want to be scared and you want to be spooked. So you know, it's all part of it, right? Like it's
Oh,
part of the
absolutely.
atmosphere. So, but yeah, it's I'm glad people are responding well to Uncharted.
Me too. It's really exciting. One last note on that. So I'm keeping my exercises up. I'm still trying to gain weight. I'm kind of stalled for the past week or two. I'm at 130. But like on topic of the movie, Tom Holland is 5'8", just like me. And he is like my body goals. Now, not movie body goals. Because I don't know if you know this, but like when actors are shredded and stuff, like really ripped, they're usually dehydrated and like on a calorie deficit so that their muscles like look really, really good.
And on
But
drugs sometimes.
yeah, sometimes. And so like That's not what I mean. I just mean like he is 141 pounds at 5'8", and I'm like, that is where ideally I want to be. Like, that's a really good spot. But yeah, I'm on week 6, day 1. Today's leg day, so after the podcast, I'm gonna go work out. But
Nice.
gonna try to keep that rolling. But let's get into what we're playing, dude. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go first, because I am so eager to hear all of your fucking thoughts on Elden Ring and stuff.
Okay, yeah, so first of all, I mentioned last time, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, and I sort of threw a couple of ideas in the air, and our topic was actually games we would go back and recomplete. And so I actually did go back and recomplete one of the games I mentioned. I went back and played Dark Souls. I already have the Dark Souls remastered completion, but not the original game. So it's backwards compatible on Xbox. So I have a physical copy, so I put it in my Series X, and there's a really great guide, like a walkthrough, to get 100% like every trophy or achievement. It's like a 20-part video series. It takes about 15 hours to follow everything and do everything. It's made for Dark Souls Remastered, but works for the original game. And it's quite quick. I mean, it's quick and easy. The achievement lists for the Soulsborne games are really quite difficult, especially without a guide, because you need to get like every unique weapon and every sorcery and every miracle and every pyromancy. And obviously, these games are quite big RPGs, and there's no, quest markers or anything, or like a journal or anything really to use. So if you're like missing something, you won't even know that you're missing something in the first place if you don't, look it up, and have no idea where to find it. And some stuff is tied to like NPC quest lines where you have to like show up at specific places at specific times. In terms of times, in terms of the game state, there's not a day-night cycle in Dark Souls. But so yeah, I went back. It was quite easy. It was quite fun. I already know the game quite well, and I've already completed it before, so it wasn't much of an issue. There was some grinding you need to do for souls, which is quite annoying, but it's about 2 hours of grinding total throughout the whole playthrough, so that's not too bad. You're mostly just playing the game, which is cool. And so I finished that up.
I had a question about that, and I was wondering if this even crossed your mind at all, but did you think you were going to burn out, like from going from a Souls game into Elden Ring, and that kind of gameplay style of like brutal?
No, I don't find these games that hard anymore. First off, especially the original Dark Souls at this point. There's a lot of, not only like can you cheese the game if you want to, there's a lot of ways to just learn the fights, that it just becomes muscle memory. It's like something, Dark Souls, it's like something like Cuphead, where once you've got it down, or like Mega Man or something, right? Like when you've got it down in your head, you will just get it every time. Like you'll just win every time, basically, unless something crazy happens. So the playthrough didn't take me that long. It is the first thing. And secondly, Dark Souls 1 is like so old at this point compared to Elden Ring that the combat system is basically the same. Like it is like a Soulsborne combat system in Elden Ring, but it's not, I don't know. It's not something I get tired of, because I really love the combat in these games. I think the combat in these games is one of the strongest aspects to them. And that seems to be the sticking point between sort of being a fan of these games versus not being a fan of these games, because they're so unrelenting with their combat and the systems that they have. But I'll go into Elden Ring now, I guess. I've been playing that since it came out. It's amazing in essentially every way, to me at least. I was quite surprised by the reviews. I thought it was going to get into the 90s probably, or like the high 80s, but a 97 is ridiculous. The reviews saying like it's arguably the greatest game of all time, or one of the greatest games of all time. But the more I play it, the more I understand those reviews, those ratings. I'd never want to rate it at this point. I'm about 35 hours in. So I've been playing it a ton, obviously, as you can imagine, because it only came out on Friday, and it's Monday now when we're recording this, and I've spent over 30 hours playing it. So yeah, I've just been playing tons and tons of it, and I feel like I'm nowhere near done, and I just want to keep playing it. It's a game where when you stop playing it, you think about it, and I've not dreamt about it, but I wouldn't put it past this game to do that to me. And it's just fantastic and miraculous that the shift to an open world turned out so well, because I kind of feel like an open world Dark Souls could be maybe like the worst thing ever if they messed it up. Like it could just be terrible. It could be like so frustrating and so like getting back to like obviously an open world's massive, so getting back to where you died could be like really really terrible if they designed it badly. But it's so good. I'm blown away by this game, to be honest. Like I don't know how they made it in like 3 years. For example, Sekiro came out in 2019. How did they make this game so quickly? Because I think at this point I'm pretty comfortable in saying that it's the best open world game I've ever played, and it might be the best role playing game I've ever played. And then it also might be the best game I've ever played ever. So I'm not sure about those last two. Those last two I need to play more and think about more. But in terms of the design, I think what amazes me the most is you will go to a dungeon in this game and it will be so easy to miss. Like 80% of players will miss what you find, and everyone will have a different story of what they find and what they see. Like they will put a cave in like the side of a cliff face in the middle of nowhere, and you will go into it and you'll be like, "Oh, this is a cool cave," and you'll go down and you'll go to a bonfire, and then you'll fight through this like handmade, like hand designed dungeon cave. Like there's none of that like Skyrim, like Oblivion bullshit where like the caves are just like procedurally generated or like copied and pasted with like a couple of minor changes. Like for the most part, the caves feel like so unique and like miniature levels that you go through, and you'll fight like enemies you've not seen before half the time, and you'll get like an item that can completely change the way you play, and then you'll fight like a boss or discover an NPC that like hangs out for like other aspects. And I want to go on, but you have a question.
I do have a question because this game I'm very conflicted on. Like, I'm going to have to play it at some point because everyone is saying it's like one of the best games ever made and things like this. But one of my big issues is that you said, oh, some players, 80% of players will miss this or never see it. And it's like, I hate that. I hate that because I like want to turn a game inside out. I want to see everything a game has. And it's like, I don't want to miss anything. And so whenever I play games like this, it stresses me out. And that, like, that's okay that maybe it's not for me. But it's like there's a lot to this game where people are like, oh, you know, there's none of this, and it's just like, oh, you just explore this way, and it's like, yeah, but I like when there's question marks, and I like whenever there's like things to go that way, because then I'm like driven to explore whatever area it is. But if it's nothing and I just have to do it myself, Breath of the Wild was the same way. I'm not a fan of Breath of the Wild just because it's just like oh, go, and I'm like, but why? Why why go?
As far as I know, you're not like locked out of stuff that you don't find in the world. So it's not like you miss it and then it's like, oh, that's it. Like, you know, GG, like you're never going to see it. It's more like the world is so open to you that you are forced to pick a direction and go in it and go check it out for yourself. And to me, that is so magnificent because of how you feel like you earn everything that you do in this game. Like when you find something, you feel elated. You feel like you find a cave in this game and you're like, fucking let's go. You're like I found a cave. Like you're like so excited that you found something because you know it's going to contain this like handcrafted like amazing level probably. And you know, like you feel special because you've discovered it and you've found it. And there's no doubt to me, I mean, there's already interactive maps on websites like I think Fextra Life and the wikis and stuff like that, where you can just pull up a map that has all the icons on it for everything in the game, and you could just do that. And in fact, when I get to the end of the game, like I'll have probably I've discovered lots in this game. My map now has a lot of icons and fast travel points and all this stuff, right? So I think I'm doing a pretty good job of discovering not quite everything because I'm sure there's some stuff I'll miss, but almost everything. Probably like 80-90% of stuff I think I've probably seen so far in the areas that I have sort of slowly worked my way through. And what I will do is by the end of the game, after I've done like everything that I can easily find, I'll look up one of those maps and cross-reference it with my own map, and then put down some waypoints of stuff that I want to go to and check out still. But what I was, I guess, more specifically meaning is that it's kind of like a Bethesda game, right? Like, it's kind of like Skyrim or Fallout, where the like the game's new and so many people are playing it, that when you talk to 5 people about the game, the experience they have will all be completely different to the experience that you've had in terms of what they've found, what they've done, what they've built towards, and no one's going to have the same experience. And I genuinely think that's really, really special. It brings me back to stuff like Minecraft, like talking about Fallout 3 back in the day with friends. Like, it, to me, it is a very special thing. And I was watching Ray Narvaez Jr. play the game, and in his first 5 hours, he found a couple of things that I hadn't found yet. And so I went back and checked them out too. But the game world is so incredibly dense that it's like, no matter what you do, you're going to have a special time. Like, you're going to find some amazing things. If you give the game enough of a chance, you're going to stumble across things that just make you gasp and like make you completely amazed by what From Software have been able to accomplish here.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I wanted to attack and ask about, which is story. And FromSoft games have generally not been the place to go for story. You have to really, like, I know there's cool lore and I know there's all that cool stuff, but you have to go outside the game generally to really deeply understand that. Yes, you can read like clip notes and like the little things that they have in the game, but it doesn't really tell me directly what I need to know. And that makes me lose interest in exploring the world. And same thing with Zelda. It's like I have no interest to explore the world because there's no reason for me to push myself. Now, with that being said, like, I'm going to play this game because I know it's going to be nominated for Game of the Year, and you know how I feel about Game of the Year awards, which, by the way, I just watched DICE.
Yeah.
And that, like,
I mean,
the awards are really good there. Like, really good.
It should almost certainly win Game of the Year.
Right,
but I know it's only February, but like I can't. It would be like an absolutely insane year for gaming if stuff comes out to contend with it. In my opinion,
and that's why I'm not gonna go into Horizon yet, but I will. But I think that like Horizon is going to be my game of the year, and even after I play Elden Ring, just because I know my tastes and I know like how things work, and if there's like not characters that I care about in Elden Ring, then I'm probably not going to care that much about Elden Ring. And I'll understand why it's one of the best games. I'll understand that free exploration, just like Breath of the Wild. But I just will have to like be okay with the idea that Elden Ring won't be my game of the year, even though it's going to sweep. I can feel it. Everyone who's talking about it just keeps like the day that it came out, I was rolling my eyes because I'm like, oh, here's another Souls game. And everyone's saying, oh, it's the best game ever made. And I'm like, God damn, this happens every time, I feel like. And then the difficulty conversation comes out, and I'm just like, God damn!
I don't think
cycle.
I don't think this has ever happened for a Souls game since Dark Souls 1.
Really?
No, and I think that if this game came out at any point in the last 10 years, it would have been Game of the Year. I think that that's how it's hard to quantify how special this game is to me personally in terms of how continually blown away I am by it in pretty much every way. And I think in terms of the story, it's intentionally, minimalist. I think there's a lot more characters in this game than in a typical Soulsborne game. Again, they're people that you'll discover. There's minor spoilers here for anyone. And the reason I say that is because I don't want to spoil anything about this game necessarily unless I have to. But there is a hub location in this game where the NPCs will gather and you can talk to them. So kind of like, like Mass Effect, like, the Normandy type thing, right? Like where there's a place where you can keep going back to it and you can talk to a lot of NPCs and they will comment on the stuff that you're doing in the world. So in terms of, whereas I think Demon Souls had that as well with the Nexus. this game has a similar thing. I mean, Dark Souls has Firelink Shrine, and Dark Souls 2 has, I think, Majula is what it's called. It's been too long, but in terms of those games, it didn't feel as much like a hub as it does in this game, and it's something where when you find NPCs in the world, they will sometimes come to sort of the hub area and will sort of come with you on your journey through the game. So in terms of the way the story and the characters are linked into the gameplay, I think that works really well. There are cutscenes in the game, and infamously, like Dark Souls 1 has barely any cutscenes, and this game doesn't have tons of cutscenes, but it has, I would say, more than a typical Soulsborne game. I think that the story is more prominent in this game than Soulsborne games, but not so far as like a narrative focused game. Not even as far as most open world games, I'd say. That there's things that will make this game fundamentally incompatible with people in the sense that From Software are making a From Software game. Like they make choices, and people like what they make. Like that their games have more than enough fans that they're probably never going to change up certain things. They're probably not going to change up the difficulty or the combat. They're not going to change up the way they approach storytelling. It's just something where, like you say, like it might not be for you because they found something that works and that people love, and they're going to keep doing that because no one else does it as well as they do it, right? Like there's nowhere else you can go to play a better version of this type of game. And so they're going to keep doing that, I think. And they've done that here. So it's not going to necessarily convince people who hate the Soulsborne games. Although I will say, I know a few people personally who have bounced off these Soulsborne games who absolutely love Elden Ring, but they seem to love Elden Ring for different reasons, in part, than why I love it and why a lot of Soulsborne fans love it. I wouldn't say it's got like something for everyone or whatever, but I would say that it does so many things right and so many things well that different people will love different specific things about this game, and that will be sort of where their emphasis is on, because it just does so many things really well. For me, I love the exploration. I love the side content. You never know what to expect in terms of the side content, and even when
that's awesome. That's something good to hear.
Even when there's like there's some dungeons where like you go to like catacombs and it uses kind of like this similar, I don't know, like a similar like preset in terms of like the sort of the stone structures of like the walls and stuff like that, and similar enemies to some extent, but they always change up like the way you're playing within the space. So like you might go to one and it be quite simple, but enemies might be like always trying to ambush you, and then you might go to another one and there'll be a bunch of traps and a bunch of stealth that you'll want to use to like get through it, and then you'll go to another one and there'll be these big tanky enemies that you can't avoid, but loads of traps that you can then use offensively on those enemies if you're like smart with like your movement and stuff. So there's all like, it's not only in terms of it's in terms of the level design differences to how you approach them, that you always have to be sort of adaptable and flexible, and you'll never, in my experience, the biggest crowning achievement of this game, perhaps to me, is that when you look at the map, when you like zoom out on the map and you look at all the bonfires you've been to and all the fast travel points, they're called like grace points in this game, and you'll like look at a cave and you'll remember what happens in that cave. You won't like confuse different caves for each other. Like you'll see the cave on the map, or you'll see the cave when you go into it, and you'll go, oh, it's this cave. Like this is the cave where this happens. This specific thing happens in this cave. And if you've played a lot of open world games and a lot of role playing games, there's almost none that you can say that about, in terms of where you look at all the, like, even the tiniest of side stuff, and you're like, I'm going to remember the specific experience I had right here, and that translates to basically everywhere on the map. And to me, that's just insane. I don't know how they did it. And then the major dungeons in this game, like the main like levels with like the biggest bosses, they feel like gigantic Dark Souls levels, and they're labyrinthian, and they're like they interlock with each other, like within themselves, and there's so many like shortcuts and routes and secrets, and I'd never have found so many secrets without like the messages people leave on the ground. There's like stuff where, because this game has a dedicated jump button now, and the jumping is easier and you can jump quite a bit higher and more distance. There's more of an emphasis on platforming, and it doesn't like it's not bad somehow. Like there's areas where you'll like jump across rooftops and you'll think like, oh, this has got to be out of bounds, like this has got to be like unintended, like I'm not supposed to go here. You'll go there and the designers will have completely thought of it and put it there on purpose. And I've had stuff where like I've like jumped over a railing onto like a lower rooftop, and it's taken me on like in most games you'd either like get hit by like an invisible wall and it'd be like, no, fuck you, you know, like stop. And then there's some games where you'll do that and you'll find like an item. Like they'll be like, oh, that's cool that you thought of that. Here's like an item that you can pick up. This game, you'll do that and it'll take you on like a winding like 20-minute adventure through like new enemy types you've never seen before, up like 5 ladders, down like an elevator, and like into a new zone that contains like a treasure chest, an NPC, or like a boss fight, and or some like enemy that you've never seen before and doesn't show up anywhere else in the game, and gives you like this sick item you can't get anywhere else. And it's like, how did they make this? How did they make this game? I can't believe what they've done in terms of this. And again, it's like, it is crazy. Like you say, that this stuff, some of this stuff is so hidden that they've got like that, you know, it's like the developers hate themselves in a way, because it's like so many people are going to miss this. So many people aren't going to see, and it's amazing. Like it's so good, and you're like, we're going to like respect the players so much in terms of we're going to let them like discover all this and like find this and explore this and feel like that it feels like, you know, it really helps with the genre being like a fantasy game. It helps the game feel like you, the player, are on an adventure. Like you're on an actual adventure. Like you're not like playing a video game. You're like actually exploring and you're actually discovering things. And it just works so well. And the game's difficulty adds to this to me, because Miyazaki and From Software, they're known for, you know, trolling the player a bit, right? Like they can be dicks to the player. And what that does for me with the exploration and the design of the game is you've got like a real sense of like dread and trepidation while you're playing. Like you're like, I've discovered this thing. How much am I going to get fucked? You know, like how bad is this going to get, basically, or how good is this going to get? Because there's almost like there's some like amazing items and amazing quests and amazing bosses and just like great things for you to discover, and there's also some like bosses that are like an absolute nightmare, and scenarios that you get in that are like such a nightmare. And it's kind of like From Software aren't afraid to essentially broaden the range of like the way game developers treat their players, if that makes sense. Like that, like they give you so much and they take so much away from you as well. Like they do both in such a broad way that works so well with this type of game, because you genuinely feel anxiety, you genuinely feel elation in ways that you don't feel in other open world games. In Far Cry, I never feel like a sense of dread when I go to like liberate an outpost or something, like a genuine like this could like ruin my night type thing, or it could give me like everything I've ever wanted. And the game does it so masterfully that you're never in a state where the game actually like ruins your playthrough, right? Like it's never going to do that. It's never going to soft lock you. It's designed so well. You can fast travel from anywhere pretty much, except from like the deepest dungeons in the game. You can fast travel anywhere at any time, and there's never like a grace point too far away from where you're at. So it's never actually going to go the full way and like ruin your game. But just the feeling of the level of risk and reward that the game has really adds to that exploration and everything the game's trying to do.
With your exploration and, you were saying, oh, it'll ruin your night or you'll get everything you ever wanted. I had a question about dying in this game. And is it typical Souls where like whatever currency you built up by killing enemies, you lose and you need to go back and get them? And then on top of that, is it like with these campfires, are you restarting? Have you lost hours? Have you, or is it
No,
like 30 minutes and then you're just back? Or
nowhere near
like
nowhere near hours. The only way you lose hours in this game is if you there's some bosses that you can find very early that you shouldn't fight early, and it's kind of been like a meme where it's kind of like an ego test, if that makes sense. Like there's some bosses where it's like you can find them really early, and like if you say like I'm gonna kill this guy, like I'm gonna kill this boss right now, I'm not gonna go somewhere else. If you say that, you might be there for hours and hours. That's the only case where you could lose hours realistically. It's always been minutes at most. And in terms of the souls question, they're called runes in this game, but I might just call them souls. But if you die, you do lose them and need to go back to them. But in this game, the way it seems to be balanced is that you are never carrying around massive amounts of souls. For me, it's like if I'm carrying around a lot, again, I'm like 30 hours in. If I'm carrying around a lot is like 5,000 maybe, and that's really not a lot. That's like 5 enemies. Like if you kill like 5 big enemies, if you kill like 5 respawning big like giant guys, that would get you back all of your souls. So even if you lost them forever, it's not a big deal. Usually what will happen is when you defeat like a massive boss, you will get a bunch of souls. But those are the only times I've had like a bunch of souls all at once. And when you defeat a massive boss, you will be like right next to a bonfire. There's like no, like you would have to go out of your way to lose them basically at that point. So I don't think I think it's the most forgiving game in that sense. And I think as well, something a lot of people who can't get into these games in terms of difficulty have experienced is because the game is so open that a lot of the time you will go to like a boss fight and you will get destroyed and you'll go, okay, I'm just going to go somewhere else then. And then you go somewhere else and then you come back later and then you fight and you win. It's not like, the problem for a lot of people, not, I don't have this issue, but I know a problem for a lot of people who don't like these types of games is that if you like can't defeat a boss at your current level, well, you've either got to go and like grind for souls, which sucks. You've got to summon someone for co-op, which they might just beat the boss for you, and that kind of sucks, right? Like, I don't like summoning other players because a lot of the time, if you summon another player, they basically just play the game for you. Like, they just fight the boss and then kill the boss, and then, you don't really feel rewarded. So you're sort of bashing against that wall in other Souls games, whereas in this game, if you can't defeat something, there's thousands of other places you can go at any time, and you can just go, okay, well, I'm just not going to do this right now. I'm going to do some other stuff. And if you want to keep doing it and want to push through and it's hell and it sucks, it's kind of like you've only got yourself to blame at that point because you're choosing to keep attempting it. You can freely go somewhere else. So I think it's approachable in that sense compared to previous games.
Awesome. That does make me a little bit happier. That is a good component. But I also had a question about player invasions. Does that still happen like Souls games?
You can invade people. I've never been invaded. Usually the way invasions work, I don't know if this is how it works in Elden Ring, but the way it works usually is there's like a priority level to invasions in the sense that if you are a player who invades other people, you are much more likely to yourself get invaded. Whereas if you're someone who does like a lot of co-op stuff or doesn't interface with the online component at all, you seem to be less likely to be invaded. And so I've never been invaded. And the only times I have are from NPC scripted invasions, which are in this game. They're in like every Dark Souls games. But those aren't like, they're technically invasions, but they're not real invasions because they're not like a player like going to ruin your day or anything. They're in specific points in the actual game world itself. I don't know where to continue with talking about this game in terms of everything it does well. I'd say that the combat it kind of takes all of the best elements from the previous games, although I think that might be overwhelming to newer players to some extent because there's a lot of mechanics going on all at once in terms of like stuff like poise, and you can like guard break people and you can like break people's posture and stuff like that, like from Sekiro, and poise is like from like Dark Souls 1, and there's like a lot of like there's a lot more depth to like the magic that's available to you in terms of like incantations and stuff like that. But what's great about this game is it feels like you can dabble in pretty much all of them. Like you can mess around with a lot of different stuff in the game. There's also, you can summon other players to help you out, but you can also summon NPCs, but you can also, there's this new thing called like Ashes of War, where, well, actually I think it's something else Ashes. I think Ashes of War is the weapon abilities, but you can essentially summon using your FP, which is the same thing you use for magic. You can summon in like a bunch of enemies, only they're like on your side and they can like distract bosses and distract enemies and fight them with you and stuff like that. You can do stuff like that which you couldn't do in previous Souls games, that also makes it quite a bit more accessible. But in terms of talking about specifics, it's like hard to do because again, like you don't want to spoil the experience for anyone because you just discover stuff that's like, oh, they won't do this, they won't do that, and then they do, and it's just, I don't know, it's really hard to get your head around it in terms of, I don't know, where everything this game does really well. And I think, I don't know, it's weird to think like whether this game holds up as well or will hold up, because it's always tough when you play a game so close to launch. There is like a hype about it, right? And everyone's playing it and everyone's talking about it and everyone's discovering stuff about it. And so will that like wear off? I think it's possible to some extent. But for me as well, the question is, obviously, I'm 30 hours in. It's probably going to take me about 80 hours total to beat the game, given how thorough I'm trying to be. And then there's New Game Plus and Plus Plus and all that stuff as well. There's a lot of things to do in this game.
Right. So and you and I are going to talk about the trophy list kind of later.
Yeah, right.
And the achievement list too.
It's just it's tough to know. I don't know. In a way, it's tough to know whether it'll hold up. In a way, it's not difficult because I feel like the game has been so consistent so far. In fact, I feel like the weakest part of the game is probably the start of the game, because at the start you're so like overwhelmed by like the map, and also the map isn't even filled in like at all. Like the map doesn't even look like a map. You have to find like these map fragments to like build up the map and stuff like that. So if anything, the weakest part of the game so far was probably the opening section. But that's also something where, again, it'll change when you replay it, because when you replay it, it'll feel like a warm hug, right? Because it's like all the basic enemies and all the because that's the other thing about this game as well, is you're like, this is the same with all Soulsborne games, but like you explore like further and further into the map and you think like, the stuff I'm going to find here is going to be like even more difficult than everything I've done before, potentially. And so you're sort of like, you know, again, it's that like that worry you have, but it's like a worried like excitement as well, because that like even with like the location designs and the enemy designs, you're sort of like, I can't wait to just uncover more stuff that this game has to offer. And the way you can like transform your gameplay experience with just even like the slightest thing that you find is amazing. There's been some level of repetition slightly, in terms of there's some encounters and some bosses where it's like it'll be like a harder version of like a previous thing, but that isn't common. And I don't know where, but there was somewhere where I won't say the number again, but there's like a number of bosses in this game and like a number of unique bosses, and the number of unique bosses is very similar to the number of total bosses. So there might be some level of repetition, again, that if it's too prominent might weaken the game slightly towards the end game. But again, it's something I can't comment on because obviously I want to be, I want to say this is not like a review of the game because I've not beaten it yet, and I wouldn't want to like put a score on it or like claim it's like the greatest game of all time or one of the greatest games of all time before I've finished it. But just in terms of so when I speak from my thoughts, it's that I can only speak to what I've experienced so far.
And that makes sense, and that's totally fine because like just with my experience lately, it's been so interesting that I'm rolling upon these games that are becoming some of my favorite ever. And I don't know how that happened, because I told you like last week or 2 weeks ago, Stardew crawled into my like top 5 favorite games ever, and Horizon is doing that for me right now. And like I will get into why it's doing that. Are you all done with Elden Ring?
Yeah, I guess the final thing I want to say is that I've seen so many people approach this game so differently and pretty much all have an amazing time, that is just another thing that's really crazy to me. The fact that I'm like there's some accounts that people have, everyone thinks there's like the right way and the wrong way to play a game implicitly. There's sometimes where I've spoken to people and it's like, oh, like I did this, I did that, right? And you're sort of like, oh, I don't know if I'd do that. Like maybe I'd do these things instead of doing that after you've sort of done all of the things that are in question. And so to hear someone have what I would consider to be somewhat unoptimized in terms of how they've played it by like pure coincidence, but the game to be so well designed that they're like, oh yeah, I love the game. Like, yeah, deserves, 10 out of 10 or whatever. Like the fact that people are having that experience and that like the guardrails just aren't there, like with the way this game is innately designed, that it's like, go have fun, right? Go like do this stuff. And also this game's like pretty hard and pretty unforgiving in some ways, but also really forgiving in others. Like it's such, I don't know, it feels like there's so many ways it could all totally have fallen apart and it hasn't, that it feels miraculous as a video game to me.
That's really exciting. I really don't know where I'm going to land on it. I hope I'm not controversial, but Souls games have never been my bread and butter, and it's so funny that like on my feed there's so many videos that are popping up that are like, it's not a 97. It's not a 97. Like David Jaffe's one of them. But like I just keep seeing it and I'm like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to land with this
Yeah,
game.
well,
I'm excited to play it, but it's just like one of those things where I have so much doubt for some reason, just because it's like people just came out and were like, this is best game ever. This is the best game ever made. And I'm like, ooh, that's
yeah. Well, I mean, I will say first of all, a lot of the people that seem to be complaining haven't played the game, which is sort of the first test, right? Like
that's true.
You should at least play it before you have an opinion on it, because that,
right.
Like when the reviews came out, I didn't doubt it, but I didn't not doubt it either. Like I just don't have an opinion on it until I play it, really. And so
Right.
So for me, that's the first thing I'd say, is that like people shouldn't get super opinionated about a game that they haven't played, which is always done for like every game ever. Like I always hear it about anything that comes out. And then the second thing I'd say is that this happens whenever a game gets good reviews, right? Like, especially a high profile game, the reviews don't even have to be this high, but the higher they get, I think the more
controversial.
Yeah, right. Like it happened with The Last of Us Part 2. It even happened with Halo Infinite, which didn't even get into the 90s.
So did Horizon.
Yeah, so the higher profile a game releases and the higher the review score, it's like always going to happen, right?
Yeah, it's a weird conversation.
And there's no like science to review scores. Like the way Metacritic works is it's just basically tallying up a bunch of people's opinions and then being like, here's like a number on it, but the number isn't like an objective measurement. It's just a collection of subjective judgments, right? So people are sort of taking it too seriously in that sense. Like every, I hate to break it to people, but every single video game has problems with it. Every single one. You can, if you really want to go through any game, you can be like, okay, like it's not a perfect thing, right? Like people, I saw Northern Lion was joking, like there's like stuff like, oh, the plants might not like move as you like move through them sometimes, or like the you can stand on some fires and the fire might not like burn you much or something. Like there's like always, or like, oh, you know, hit a wall with your sword and part of the texture goes through it or something. Like there's always stuff either like mechanically or technically with any game that is going to make it by definition not a perfect video game, because there's no such thing. So
There is no such thing.
so sort of the entire, I guess, angle of like, oh, it's not a 97 because these things are wrong with it, it kind of misses the point to me, because it's like, if you look at any game at that top level, right, like Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, I don't know, Uncharted 2, Halo Combat Evolved, like you can name things that aren't perfect about those games. Like every game, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a 97 as well. There's Red Dead Redemption 2 has a 97, but the loading times are like 2 minutes long, right? Like on last gen when the game came out, right? Like
Absolutely.
there's, you know, it kind of annoys me in the sense like we get it, right? Like there's things wrong with every game that people give a 10 out of 10 to, but it's kind of
Right.
like, maybe you should just stop obsessing about scores so much, perhaps, or like see it as it is, which is that it's subjective. Like all of it is subjective. It's all opinion. There's no like there's no formula or like science to figure out a rating for a game. It's like what it makes you feel, how you think while playing it, like what you see and what you like and what you dislike. Like it's all innately subjective. So the way I push back on that is just like it feels like it's kind of missing the point in a
Missing the
way.
point, yeah. Absolutely. And dude, I was just making an observation. Like this is what my feed is full of. It's full of like, it's not a 97, or like videos that are, clickbaity like that. And then, or it's like, oh, it's the best game ever. And it's like, there's no in between.
Yeah, I mean,
That's just how it
unfortunately,
is.
it's sort of like you're about to talk about Horizon, and
Yeah. And the
it's
conversation opposite on Horizon, where people are saying like, oh, it's not high
well,
enough.
no. What I was going to say is it's really unfortunate because a lot of the discourse doesn't seem to be genuine, in that people are sort of pitting these two games against each other, which
Yeah.
is weird because they're not really similar games. They just happen to come out around the same time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the only, like if Elden Ring came out 6 months ago, people wouldn't now be comparing Horizon Forbidden West to Elden Ring, right? Like
Right.
they're not, so it's kind of like the whole thing of like, and it seems to have like picked up traction in like fanboy circles for some reason, like because one's Sony first party and
Exclusive.
one isn't.
Yeah.
But it's like it doesn't, none of that stuff really makes much sense to me, because again, it's like they're not really that comparable in terms of, other than the fact that they came out basically at the same time and reviewers, I guess, played them at similar times or the same time. But I mean, if you think about that as well, right? Like if you're like IGN, I'm pretty sure the guy who reviewed Elden Ring isn't the guy who reviewed Horizon. So it's like it's not even the same person that reviewed these games for these outlets a lot of the time. So how can you directly compare the review scores, because they're not reviewed all by the same people, and that can be a problem, right? I feel like outlets, you do sort of see outlets as one voice, even though they're a collection of multiple voices. But again, a lot of the comparisons seem a bit, I don't know, that tenuous to me.
I think that Horizon just needs to be better at picking release dates and release years, because this is hilarious. This is repeating history. Like Horizon came out a couple days before Breath of the Wild and then just got snuffed, just destroyed. And that happens here again, where Horizon came out, and I think that it's a little different this time, because I don't think that Horizon 1 was like one of these best games ever, which I'm going to talk about, like for me, why Horizon is one of my favorite, like Horizon 2 specifically is one of my favorites, and like then comparing it to one of the best games of all time, and now people saying the best game of all time. And it's just funny that it's both releases have been like
Yeah, I mean,
followed by one of the best games of all time.
I want to
You know?
say as well, I don't really fully understand why people are so heated about this, pseudo debate that doesn't make sense in terms of these two games against each other, right? Because to me, I look at the Horizon score and like, yeah, okay, like it got like the same score as the first game, which I can understand that being like a slight like people were sort of, I understand people being like, oh, I hope it, I wish it broke 90, I wish it got like a 91 at least, right? Because
Yeah.
because a lot of people do seem to think like what seems to have happened, and I don't know, is that Horizon Forbidden West is better than Horizon Zero Dawn. Seems to be
By a lot.
what the reviewers think as well. But maybe there might be a combination of like the standards and the expectations were lower when Zero Dawn came out, or now at this point Forbidden West has been a bit underserved, or like a combination of the two slightly, right? So I understand the disappointment from that angle, but when I look at the scores for both of these games, these are both amazing games, and critics believe these are both amazing games, right? Like I think people have to understand that Elden Ring is like a game that shows up like once every like 4 years, right? Like it's like a freak event, right? Like it's not like it being so high doesn't make Forbidden West look like a bad game. And if people are saying like, oh, it does, then I feel like they're like Xbox fanboys or Nintendo fanboys or whatever. Like I get that,
So
like
true.
people are trolling people and all of that stuff. But in terms of if you just take the scores like and you just look at them, like critics love both of these games, and critics would highly recommend both of these games. And it's like you said towards the top of the show, right? That it's just a great time for gaming. Like these are both just amazing. So it's like
They
just
really are.
enjoy it, right? And the critics didn't, in my opinion, they didn't really like, maybe by like a few points, like we've said, right? But there aren't that many more points you can give to Horizon Forbidden West, right? Like it's got like what, like an 88, an 87. So like
80, I think it's 89. I think it's just like right under 90.
right, exactly right. It's 11 points away from being like or like 13 points or whatever it actually is, right? It's so
Yeah.
close to getting like a perfect score anyway. Like it's at the top of the 80s that it's like it's hard for me to get mad, and I wouldn't be like too annoyed about it, because I think Gorilla should be really proud and really happy, and I
I
think
do
Sony
too.
should be really proud and really happy, and I think the critics have said, hey, this game is really great. Maybe it's again slight disappointment that it's not a couple of points higher, but it's like how upset can you get about a couple of points, right? In terms of this stuff, again, especially considering we've talked about how subjective it all is anyway, and that it's not like a objective measure of quality or like a
Right.
factual statement. You don't have to sort of take it that way. So
What I'm most upset about actually in this whole conversation, and I don't know how it is for other people, but this is exactly what I'm upset about with this release and then the release of Elden Ring, is that the amount of people who put Horizon down to play Elden Ring, that is what's upsetting. It's like, yes, it's fine, like play whatever you want, do whatever you want, but it's like I know how many people are going to put down Horizon, and they're maybe a quarter halfway through because it was a couple days before, and then they're never going to touch Horizon again. Like it just happens. And like there's YouTube reviews that I've watched where they're like, I had to rush Horizon because if I didn't, I wasn't going to play it after Elden Ring. It's like, what? You're disrespecting this game that is really, really fantastic. And I'm not saying this is happening on a mass level. I'm just saying this is happening. This is happening, and it's really disappointing. And I'm glad that people will go back to it, but it's weird to just like drop something that is so spectacular because of a zeitgeist or because of a release date. And I've had conversations where it's like people are just slaves to release dates. It's like that's very true.
yeah, I mean
They would just play what's most hype at the very moment, and they don't finish things. And that's just how the video game industry works, because it's not like a movie. It's not like it can come out, you can see it one day, and then the next day there's another movie, you can go see that too. It's like you can't balance both of these. And so I think that right now it's like people are choosing to play one or the other, or they both have, or you're choosing and you're playing a couple hours of one and then a couple hours of the other, and you're just like, now I'm not going to play the other one. And I think that's where like people are really upset, but they're taking it out on these stupid arbitrary things that are like, oh, review score, or like it's better or whatever. It's just, I just want people to play it because I'm going to go into it very soon, but like, I cannot believe Horizon. And there's like a lot of criticisms that people have about it that are totally valid. But then there's like things that I just don't get that people complain about. And I'll get into that too. And then we can jump right into the topic on the table, because I'm telling you, all of this is so related. And I'm so glad that we're having the discussion, because that is like my primary thing. It's like people just drop it. And I'm like,
Yeah,
why?
well, I mean, it's part of it is because of, I mean, it's really unfortunate timing, right? Like the that is something that I'm sure Guerrilla and Sony are annoyed about, in terms of like, to a small extent, right? Like I think like Horizon's going to sell amazingly. It's reviewed great again. So
I was about to say that.
again, like they're happy, right? I
They're
don't
gonna
want
be mad. They're gonna be mad people aren't playing it, but they're gonna be counting their dollar bills and being like,
yeah, they're going to be yeah, in other words, like there's going to be like a couple of people that are going to be very slightly annoyed for a moment and then, you know, really happy again. I don't mean they're going to be like actually like, oh no, you know, like upset, but in terms of like it kind of feels like they're like cursed with Horizon, right? Because of, like you said, about like Breath of the Wild and then Elden Ring, and they'll also feel sort of a bit pissed off because Horizon Forbidden West was meant to be a launch title for the PS5, right? Like that was their plans, and or in the launch window at least, right? And then COVID happened and they had to delay everything, as everyone did. And so it sort of was like, you know, for them it's kind of annoying in the sense that they didn't plan to release this game anywhere near Elden Ring. And Elden Ring got delayed as well. So it's like neither of these companies really wanted to release the, like, it just sort of, that's just where everything landed in the end, right? Like everything was thrown up into chaos and then everything came back down and landed so that these two games came out like around the same time, right? Like Sony didn't initially plan for that. From Software didn't plan for that. Bandai Namco didn't plan for that. It just sort
Absolutely.
of happened. And also, you know, who could have possibly predicted the scores and all of that stuff as well? So there's, you know, it. I can understand, you know, and it sucks in terms of that, right? In terms of release dates, because, like you say, both of these are massive games. You know, tens of hours long, you know, probably 50 plus if you want to do everything in either of them. So
Yeah.
you know, that angle sucks, you know, and I don't think there's anything malicious about it necessarily, but you're right in that there's lots of games where I've gotten a few hours in, and like you say, there's almost like there's like just enough time for people to get like a good chunk in, but not quite far enough, like sort of like a quarter of the way through or so. Like they get like that far, then the reviews for Elden Ring drop, and then it's like, oh shit, I've got to drop everything to play this. And
Yep.
so then it's like, I can understand them being in a difficult position, but also the angle of like, there's so many games where I've played like 10 hours of them and then not gone back to them. You know, Far Cry 6 is in that camp, Far Cry 5 is in that camp, Red Dead Redemption 2 is in that camp for me. It happens to people. And so it sucks that that's happened to Horizon. I haven't heard many people talk about that, but you're definitely right.
Yeah. But I'm going to jump into what I'm chasing real quick, and then we're going to get back to this because there's a lot more that I want to say. And first off, I've been continuing with Stardew Valley. I was playing this before Horizon released, and it's so interesting because I'm very conflicted now. I'm still obsessed. I still love this game. It's still in my top 5. But I'm conflicted because I've been putting more time in on my Vita, and I found like patch notes, and I know how far behind Vita is, and I feel like I'm not playing the game correctly on Vita because it's missing a ton of updates. It's missing cutscenes and like things that I want to see. So I'm like, do I just invest the time on PS5 and like not mobile? And but it's like I still love my Vita and I want to play it, but it's like I don't know which one I want a trophy hunt on because it's a tied list. But that's like what I've been doing. I just have been kind of conflicted in playing both a little bit, just a little on the PS5, not very much, but most of my time is on Vita. And I'm probably going to just do maybe cutscenes and like character friendships on PS5, and that'll be it. I won't do anything else. But that's that. And then I put Persona 5 Strikers on the back burner. This is actually going to happen. This has been happening a lot lately where I put games away. Like there's so many games that I need to go back and complete and get my platinums because they're almost done, but they're not. And so I will be doing that maybe in the summer because I think that Elden Ring I'll play closer to the summer. That's like where I'm thinking, just because game releases slow down. It's E3. It's a lot easier. It's just like March and February stacked, and then I'm going to be playing these games like going out of spring and trying to catch up. But Horizon, back to Horizon, dude. Oh my God, I'm in love with this game. It's everything I wanted. Like, I've been waiting for this. I think I've told you this before, but like ever since Witcher 3, I'm always waiting for an open world game to hit this point where I'm like, this is what I want video games to be. For God's sake, this is what I want it to be. Every single side quest, every single thing in the game is just so meticulously done and detail is added to it. And like, for example, there's cinematography and things like that, but then there's like character animations, and like a lot of open world games are just like, oh, we're going to have the same 3 stock animations just doing the same thing over and over while the NPC stands still. And it's like, you just feel that NPC is not real, and you just feel like, oh, we're going to go off into the world and do exactly what they do, fetch quests, whatever. This is just how video games are. And like Horizon is taking a step back and is like, hey, we're in this location, we're going to do something. You might have to meet me in another location because there's things that are going to happen in this world, things are going to change, and we have to meet. And so it's like, you'll be out in the wild, and then, they'll be doing these animations. And there was one specific character animation where the character stopped talking to mimic, was like, are you gonna, and then like did a body gesture. So you can't see it right now, but I'm doing like the finger, the pointer finger, middle finger, like you're walking. It's like they animated that. And you don't see that in video games because that takes so much work. And I'm like, how many people are going to skip over like cutscenes or not do side stuff and see this? But every single thing, like, it's not like stiff animation when you're like, and I'm talking faces now. When you're doing side stuff, the animations on the faces is like so well done. It's like it's main stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I want them to do. I want these stories to mean something. I want them to build the world. The more like side stuff that you do and then you return to towns, it's like the more famous that you are, the more like the town changes and like the structure. There's like a political one that I did of a side quest, and it like changed the town. And I'm like, well, I'm actually having effects on this world. Like the open world is so well done, and I'm like obsessed with that. And I think that's why people complain about the score. They're like, why is this so low when this is like one of now, coming out next to Elden Ring? It's like, these are some of the best open worlds that are out right now. Like you can't get better. You can't get better than these two. It's incredible. And like, I wanted to talk about my specific like favorite things. Like there's points on the map that are called Vista points. And basically they're like ruins that you'll find, and you might find like a lens or something, and then you scan it, and it's like, oh, this, you need to find out this puzzle and like line it up with these ruins, and you can see what used to be there. And it's generally some kind of like landmark or something from our time that's completely ruined, trees are growing out of it or whatever, and then you line it up and you can see into the past, and it's so cool. It's like one of the coolest little puzzle mechanics. I freaking love finding those. But then also just exploring old ruins. Super well done in this game. There's like puzzles and stuff that are being done, and it makes me want to see everything. And that's a great design. That's how games should be. They shouldn't just be like an open world with narrow like story, and then the side stuff is like super generic, just super joke. Go get me this, go fish, go find me 5 of that. It's like, it's not like that in this game, which is so good to see. But I do have like criticisms, like the frustration that I'm having with 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second and not like optimizing that, because 30 frames per second 4K looks so good, and 60 frames in 1800p does not look good. I am not playing it that way because I cannot. It looks good when you're moving the camera, but when you stop and you look at a vista and I see like it's not sharp, the edges on like grass and stuff are like blocky, and it makes it look like fuzzy, and I'm like, oh, that's so disgusting. I'd rather play in 30 than see that. And it's like, why is that not better optimized? So that's a good criticism. That's a good criticism that I'm seeing. But then also the climbing sometimes is really janky and not very good, which they improved it from the last game, but it's by a lot. by a lot from the last game, giving you more freedom to go wherever you want, but not like you can climb everything like Breath of the Wild. So that's good in my opinion, because I think that just copying Breath of the Wild directly, but it's more like when they added a bunch of mechanics to climbing. So like jumping directly backwards and like being able to create or do level design where you know you need to jump from place to place, and then the jumping not working or the grapple not working when you're trying to get from one place to another. That's what I'm talking about with jank. It's like it just needs to work all the time, but it does feel good sometimes when you're really high up and then you're trying to do something. And like specifically there was a dungeon that I was doing and it had a lot of water in it. And so whenever I risked, you know, trying to do something, if I failed, I landed in the water and I was like, damn, I got to retry. But every single time I jumped, my heart would like stop. And I was like, oh, am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? And I did. Like, you get that feeling. And it's like, if it wasn't so jank, probably wouldn't get that feeling. But it's still janky and it should work. But it does feel good to like do some of those maneuvers. And that's kind of where I wanted to talk about. That's me gushing. But man, the combat in this game is great. The story is really good, which people complain about the story. And like, I was watching some streamers and they'll skip dialogue or they'll talk over it. And it's like, I ask for better facial animations. That's something that I want in all video games. I am so tired of like the stiff, only mouth moving or like them, you know, doing that. And it's like everything from side quests to main story, super well animated. And I love that. But people don't. And it's like, why should they invest in that if people are just going to skip this dialogue and all the stuff that's happening with the facial animations? Like every single dialogue tree that I open up, I'm excited to listen to every single dialogue option and see how the characters are going to move, how their facial animations are going to react, all of that. So I go down every tree and I'm seeing people that are like, yeah, I just choose the dialogue options that I want and then leave. And it's like, that's cool, but you're missing out on a lot of work that Guerrilla has done. And it's like, why should they do that? Because in the first game, everyone complained how stiff the animations were. They complained about that and they fixed it and then no one sees it. And it's like, why? Why would they waste the budget on that? It doesn't make sense. But
yeah, there's always like certain stuff in games that like loads of people work on that most of the player base don't care about. It's kind of like I think about that in terms of audio as well. Like, you know, like people only notice audio if there's like something wrong with it, you know? Like if the audio is like really, really good and like the directionality of it is amazing and you can hear like footsteps behind you and around you and can pinpoint them really well. You know, it's stuff that like, you know, I know Returnal apparently has really great audio and Halo Infinite in terms of multiplayer and you know, in terms of like knowing where things are like happening. It's like so important for a bunch of games. And most people, it's like they only notice it if it's broken. And it reminded me of what you were saying about facial animations, because it's like I never hear anyone talk about facial animations unless it's like Mass Effect Andromeda, where they were like totally broken, or like something like LA Noire, where it was like a really like new method of like capturing people's faces for the time. And there was some, you know, janky like meme stuff there as well. It's like there's certain aspects of games where it's like people pretty much only notice it for the most part. Like a large amount of players only notice it or talk about it if it's like busted or like broken.
Yeah, and I'm noticing it so much that it's just it's something that I just treasure, dude. I treasure this because I want games to do it. I want games to care about the side stuff. I can't keep doing these open world games that don't care about their side stuff. And this is what I was going to ask you before we started. Have you seen Donkey's new video on Horizon?
Yep, I have.
Okay, so this is an argument that I had with my friend, and it all started from Donkey's video, because Donkey makes great videos, but Donkey is getting bored of video games. And I keep telling my friend, I'm like, he's just bored of video games, because if we look at the structure of movies, they don't change. You know, they have the introduction, they have the rising action, they have the climax, they have the falling action, they have the exposition. Pretty much every story does that. And it's like, we don't complain. But then when video games all have an open world structure where it's like, it's an open world that's going to tell a story, you get to do side stuff if you want to, or you can not. And like, he's like, oh, so I'm playing the same game over and over again, and now it's boring. And it's like, does making a good game mean you have to change the industry every time? And for me, I'm like, I don't think that it has to be that way, because I think that Horizon is extremely innovative in the open world structure. Now, do I say that people shouldn't try to fuck with the open world structure? Absolutely not. Fuck with it. Try to make it better. Try to make something new that we would have never thought about, and then it changes the industry forever. I love that. Innovation is very good, but I'm not saying that like games that are using it are bad. And Donkey pretty much was like, he said, I don't like this game, but I know a lot of people will love it and very few will, or he said most people will like it, very few will love it or despise it. And that's true. And it's just one of these things where I was like, you don't have to change everything about an open world game in order for it to be a good game. And that's where I was like, Horizon has fixed things from its last game. It's doing like side quests so much better than any other game. Like, it's doing side stuff on the level of Witcher, which is so good because I've always wanted that. I'm a huge side quest stuff. That's why whenever you were talking about Elden Ring, I was so happy that you were like, the side stuff in this game is great, because that's what I want. I want a world to be open, and then I go in to do stuff that's around the world, and it feels like it's existing there. It's living there.
Yeah,
It's not
I
just
mean,
like a character that's been planted, and it's like, oh, there's a point where you can run and grab shit for that, for that like NPC.
this might piss people off, but I was talking to a friend about Elden Ring, and I was like, Elden Ring's side content is better than like Dragon Age's like main story content. Like, that's how good it is.
Yes,
Yes. The side stuff feels as good as other role playing games' main story stuff somehow, which is crazy. In terms
absolutely.
of what you said about Donkey, I just want to go back for a second. Yeah, I think you characterized his review well. I mean, like, he definitely says, like, he says multiple times that the game's a good game. Like, fundamentally, it's a good product, right? Like, it's not bad, and but he wants things that are different, and I don't think there's and people take his words, right, and then they hate on the game all of a sudden, right? Like, they
Right.
escalate it. Like, he says something and they take it out of context, and
Exactly.
he's and a lot of like what he was saying was he was talking about very openly about like his own subjective experience in terms of like unfortunate timing, like with Elden Ring, and then like he said about that he just got done playing Pokemon Legends Arceus as well, and
Dying Light 2.
yeah, exactly, and some of that stuff reminded him of Horizon, and I don't think he's trying to say like, this is why Horizon sucks. He's saying like, this is why I didn't have as good a time with it as I could have, is sort of his perspective on that, I think. So, I don't think he's like necessarily saying like you need to innovate. I think it's just that, like, again, like, unfortunate timing and something where it's like, for him, he wants to play different types of games at this point, and I can appreciate that, because I've spoken before about how I can't keep up with like Ubisoft releases specifically. Like, Assassin's Creed was the big one for me, where when they were doing the thing where they were like releasing one every year, and then some years were like releasing two, or like one and like a spin-off or something, in terms of like Assassin's Creed Rogue, where it's like a 360 version of like a when they went like next gen only or something. Like, there's like weird stuff where Ubisoft started doing that, where they started releasing like one a year, sometimes two a year, based on spin-offs and other stuff. And for me, it was like, I like these games are pretty good, but so many games come out and so many games can be different that I'm like, I don't know if I have time, especially because, and I think where the problem maybe comes in, is that a lot of these games, specifically like open world role-playing stuff, can demand tens of hours, right? They can be like pushing like 50 hours or something, especially, again, this is less Donkey, more me, right? We like to complete games, so we like to get everything in the game, which means that like maximum time is closer to what I would be spending on the game, right? So the problem for me would come in the sense that a lot of these games come out and it's like not necessarily like a quality thing, just like I can't even keep up. Like, even if I thought this genre was like the best genre ever, and I really, really, really love it. It can be difficult because you're sort of overstimulated, and there's just so many overstimulated by it and oversaturated in the sense that there's just so many of these, and if you really want to complete all of them, like it's so hard to keep up. And so I can understand that perspective as well of like, you know, I got to play different stuff because I can't even like purely in terms of like hours of my life, I can't do this. And it sucks for Horizon in the sense that some people are saying like what you're saying and what critics are saying, that this is like so good, and like almost like, oh well, maybe, you know, Donkey shouldn't have played Far Cry, or shouldn't have played, you know, because Far Cry 6 didn't, you know, set the world on fire. You know, I know some people really love it, but some, you know, in terms of critical consensus and audience, it didn't seem to be, you know, too hot in terms of how people viewed it. So like, you know, it's unfortunate that Horizon is like a victim of circumstance in that sense, because, you know, maybe it should have taken precedent over these other games that have a similar structure, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'm not trying to dunk on Donkey. That's not my point here. My point was that he was a jumping off point for the conversation that ended up happening between me and my best friend, which is basically that I don't think that open world games need to change their structure in order to be innovative. That was my initial like idea to this conversation. And I was like, Horizon has innovated in side stuff. They're innovative in facial animations. They're like really push, which by the way, you were talking about how LA Noir was like using new tech for facial animations. I feel like Horizon is. Horizon's facial animations really catch me off guard. Not only that, but their body animations too. But like just the whole, if there's an animation award at the Game Awards, give it to this, because it is crazy how good the animation is. And I just am like going around the world, and it doesn't feel like other open world games where I just feel like things are so static. They're so static, dude. And that is a problem to me. It's like I love open world games. I love doing that stuff. I'll still do it, but it's I want to be immersed. I don't want to be like just going and getting something, you know? If there's a murder or, you know, like some political situation that's happening in the universe, I want it to be dynamic and changing and be part of that world. I just want it to be more built out and fleshed out instead of this shell that is open world games. And Ubisoft is the worst one of this. This is where like I actually turned to my friend and I was like, I am done. Like I just a couple months ago I was talking about how I love Ubisoft, and like I took a dark turn with Ubisoft because they just do the exact open world formula, but they don't put any life into it. It's just dead. And I'm so tired of it. It's like I'm not going to buy their games anymore, especially because they're going to like games as a service, but it just is getting to this point where it's like I need the world to feel alive, just like Witcher, just like Horizon. I need the side stuff to be better. Like we have to hold the industry to a better standard, and it's just one of those things where Donkey didn't, I don't think he acknowledges how good it was because he had open world fatigue and like is thinking about a different structure to open world games rather than what the game did good. And that's fine. It's totally his prerogative, especially because he had just had that open world fatigue of all the other games. But he says in the video, like, I just played Horizon because I just played these other games. And it's like, you didn't. You didn't just play Horizon because even though it's the same structure, it's so much better than the other ones. Like, so much better that it shouldn't feel like you just played it. And that's where I, like, went to my friend and I was like, do you think that every game needs to be super innovative in terms of structure in order to be good? And he said, yes, like they have to innovate or games are just the same. And I'm just not in that boat. And I told him that's like, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. But it totally brought up this idea that like, it's weird how I'm in this place where I'm like, I love innovation. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't see a structure that needs to be born out of thin air in order for games to be good today.
Yeah, I think that there's
Do you
always
think that Elden Ring does that?
more that can be done. I think Elden Ring does things right that pretty much every other open world game I've played does wrong. Like you say about like Horizon with side content. I feel that way about Elden Ring, and I think the way it does, like just like the bosses and level design and things like that, I think it it feels like it marries sort of linear and open world together in like a really compelling way. I mean, it's tough, right? Because a lot of, I think at this point in the industry, there's still like a long way to go in terms of improving games. But I also think that so many games come out now that sort of the path to progress is more incremental than revolutionary, typically, if that makes sense. So it's like once in a while you get something like a battle royale or something that comes out and sort of changes things, or like a Minecraft or something. But I feel generally, things are sort of more incremental in terms of change. And a lot of the time as well, even with stuff like Minecraft and like Battle Royale, people point to different things as like the thing that changed everything, or like the sort of the seeds of the revolution. So you can sort of get stuck in a trap of discussing that, I think, to some extent. I don't think games need to be like that to, they need to change things to be significant. I mean, I think there's a lot of elitism in the industry right now. And part of that seems to be because I think there's more high quality releases than ever. I think you see it like in like the console wars as well, right? In terms of like, I think PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox are all making great games at this point. Or releasing great games, and so there's like almost this like, among some people there's like, I can't admit that these things are also awesome, so I have to sort of pretend that I only play like 95 rated games, right? Like only those are acceptable to me or something.
Yeah.
Like there's an elitism there, and I think that has sort of bled over to this with like Elden Ring, right? That there's almost like this, again, like earlier, like by all accounts, Horizon is an amazing, a fantastic game, and so it's like it's so sad to see people be like, oh, only Elden Ring is acceptable or whatever. Like it doesn't make sense to me, and so I think that there's almost this this culture that's forming that's kind of not being quite disingenuous about quality of specific titles, and yeah, I don't think you have to revolutionize a structure to be relevant or be amazing. And I think different people have different genre preferences innately. Like I play and love a lot of shooters, first person shooters and platformers. And so and I play a lot of roguelikes as well, as you know. So
Mhm.
that genre for me, I have a higher tolerance perhaps for there not being any sort of revolutions in the genre, right? Because I like to play tons of different games in that genre. And there's a lot of people who, like you say, have this open world fatigue. And then there's other people who are just like, open world games are like totally my thing. And I just want more of that and want to get all that I can. And, I'm like that for certain genres. Everyone's like that for certain genres. People are like that with JRPGs, which is crazy to me because a lot of those are like 150 hours long. So,
Dude.
but people are like that, right? Where they're like, I want to be all over them. Whereas for me, my bar for that would be like, it would have to be something revolutionary because I'm just so outside of that genre and so uninterested in it. Again, nothing
Right.
about quality, but just from what I want out of a game.
And
And
JRPGs, by the way, are the worst with side stuff. The absolute fucking worst. I'm just telling you, like, there is so much side stuff, but whenever I talk about static and NPCs, they literally stand in one spot and they ask you to go get them stuff every single time. I'm telling you, every JRPG has like, people always talk about and meme about the fishing games, but they want you to go catch fish and then come back to them and give them the fish. And then they want you to go get recipes and then bring them back to you and give them, like, it's always the same exact shit and it's never different and it's never voice acted. It's like it's always text and I'm like, it's not even animated. They don't even move. It's just like, oh my god, it's the worst. But I wanted to talk about, you brought up the incremental innovations that are happening, and I think that is like the perfect summarization of this generation. Like, we are not going from last gen to this gen. We didn't go from, you know, PS1 to PS2 graphics or PS2 to PS3 graphics. Like, this is different. This is like incremental. You know, we're going the same graphics with like the resolution hitting 4K last generation, but then you can't hit 60, but you can on PS5, and it's like faster loading times. These are incremental. These are incremental little adjustments, and there's people who are arguing like they don't need the next gen console because it's incremental, and that's true and fine. Like, you can not have the luxuries of what current gen is, but I think that this is just exactly where it's going. It's these incremental things that are making things better, but it's not going to be like it was back then when we have these giant leaps in technology.
Yeah.
Unless we're talking about VR and like that kind of leap into something completely new.
Games are becoming, like, as well on that front, in terms of production and in terms of design, a lot of games are becoming like so refined in terms of that, in terms of the pipeline. Now, it seems to have gone backwards in a way in terms of the tech stuff, you know, with like Battlefield and Cyberpunk and all of that. So not necessarily from that point refined. Like, I don't mean it in that sense, but in terms of a design, in terms of some aspects of templates, and in terms of like production, there's been a level of refinement where I can understand, you know, people being frustrated by that to some extent. And also, at the same time, it's kind of both, where it's like, I can understand being frustrated by that it is sort of sanitized and, you know, Dunkey used the term like market tested and that sort of thing. I can understand being frustrated at that. At the same time, it's also like fantastic and great because you're getting like such a high density of high quality releases, and, you know, a consequence of that is maybe some of them do start to blur together a little, and it might become harder to find something that you personally sort of really, really fall in love with and sort of does that version of that type of game in the way that you really want. So I can see both, and I think you know, both is happening, but I think it's probably more good than bad overall that we're in this place in terms of the industry and how efficient and, you know, effective the industry's becoming at producing these games that people clearly like and people buy.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate you hearing me out on that, because this is just something that it's been kind of been a point of discussion that I'm surprised not more people are having, because if games are all the same as they've been for the past couple of years, which is this open world structure of, you know, like I told you, it's that open world, like you have the narrative main quests, have the side quests, and then you have like collectibles. And like that is like every open world game. But if you break it down more into each of those things, like some games get so much better at doing side quests that make the world matter, and like they're starting to do better environmental storytelling and all kinds of little innovations and animations that make this industry better. And I just really wanted to have that conversation with you. So that was really, really dope. So thank you for that. And are you ready for the trophy and achievement of the week?
Yeah, let's do it. I can start. So
Okay,
I
go
mentioned LA Noire earlier, and it's actually completely coincidental, but the achievement list in Elden Ring and in Dark Souls, not very good in terms of, I mean, the game's fun, like really fun, and it's fun to go for the achievements. But they're pretty much all like kill bosses, you know, see the ending, and upgrade a weapon to max, and then get all the weapons, get all the sorceries, get all the miracles, and that's basically it. In some of the games, there's like stuff for like NPC quest lines, but there's not any achievements like that in Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Well, okay, I mean, technically, probably to get some of the achievement requirements, you will have to do NPC quest lines, but there's not an achievement for the actual quests themselves. So the achievements are kind of, you know, quite uninteresting for both of those games. So I had to go back and look through, you know, the archives of games that I've played. And so I picked an achievement in LA Noire. It's called Public Menace, which is to rack up $47,000 in penalties during a single story case. And I like when games, it made me think about when games have an achievement for sort of like doing so badly, like be like so bad at your job and like what you're meant to do, that they reward you for it. And I always like when games do that and when games think about that. Just generally, obviously, when achievements or trophies give you something for something that isn't obvious and wouldn't be like directly in your path, and also wouldn't fit within the goals of the game. So sort of like an anti-achievement in a sense. So shout out to LA Noire, great game and good achievement.
I need to play that game because it's very like narrative heavy, and I have not played it. But
oh, it's fantastic.
I wonder if they'll did they do a remaster?
Yeah, they released a remaster on PS4 and Xbox One.
Okay, so yeah, then I need to just jump in.
It's got all of the like DLC cases and everything in it as well.
Cool.
Automatically.
Very
because
cool.
The way DLC worked in that game was quite annoying with the original release, if I remember rightly, because through the main story you like work, you work different cases, obviously, you're a detective, and the DLC cases would get like put in at different points in the main story. So like if you'd already gone too far in the story, you can't do those cases, or you have to like skip back or whatever. Whereas with the remaster, what's great is because it's all in the game, it like all happens in sequence like it should.
That is so interesting. That's really cool. I actually appreciate little touches like that on remasters. You and I kind of talked a little bit about how bad the lists were for Elden Ring and Horizon, but you have no fucking idea, because whenever I'm playing a game and like I upgrade 3 items and then it pops a trophy that says upgraded 3 items instead of having a name for the trophy, I'm like, Jesus, this is lazy as shit. Like, they don't even have titles for the goddamn trophies. It's really awful. So I did not choose anything from Horizon. I'm serious. All of them are like, oh, you killed 10 of this 10 different types of enemies. And then the trophy's name is killed 10 different enemies.
Oh, like, no, that's like early 360 level.
Dude, it's so bad. Performed 3 melee combos. That's the name of a trophy. That's the name of one. Like, stealth killed 10 machines. That's the name of it. The description of it is perform 10 stealth kills on machines.
Yeah, when I was playing Condemned, the achievements were all like that. But that was like in what, like 2006?
Dude, right. I'm like, damn, this game is so innovative. And then the trophy list is like, yeah, except we just don't care.
That's like they forgot about the list. Like, and we're like, oh shit, we gotta put them in.
For real. I wonder what the platinum's called. All trophies obtained. That's just what it's called. Oh my god. But yes. I chose Cyberpunk has finally released. I don't know if you knew this, but yeah, it's been delayed for years and it's finally out. But I chose the frequent flyer trophy from this. That's the name of it, and it's just finding all fast travel data terms. And I thought that was really just creative and fun for a trophy name. And I was like, I'll just pick that because I think that it's a good idea to highlight Cyberpunk, and it's like it's kind of having a comeback story. Now the only thing that like they still fucked up. No need to just like erase that from history. They fucked up big time. But what I want to see is them be like, oh hey, this first expansion that we said was going to be bigger than Blood and Wine and Witcher, free for everyone who bought the game. Just like that would be so awesome. That would be like that would get their good reputation back. It's like you fucked everyone. You sold 13 million copies on a game that can't even run. And now you're releasing something free because you're saying you're sorry. That's almost a whole nother game. I think that's the only way to come back, really, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens, And yeah, that's it. Do you have any other final thoughts, AJ?
No, I mean, I've got to get into Cyberpunk. I played it, must have been pretty far into the past, pre-release. I played it for like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours. It's annoying because I unlocked like one achievement, so like it's permanent. So now I have to go back at some point. But
I'm really excited too. Yeah, my friend said that was like his game of the year, and it was buggy for him. And he played it, he played it on PS5, but he was like his Cyberpunk is like his favorite genre, and he's like just it's so done so well here. And I'm also hearing I heard this from some streamers that I watched that like another one of those games where it feels really good with side stuff. God damn, I'm not going to get over that. Side stuff has to be good. And it's like these situations where you're like moving throughout the world and like these NPCs are with you and like it's dynamic and it feels good. And I'm like very excited for that. So it's going to be fun to play Horizon and then Cyberpunk and have that experience where the world is immersive, and then I'm going to go back to Dead Worlds for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it'll be good to hear your thoughts on it, because I was sort of enjoying it, but not far enough to like properly get acclimatized to it, because I kept getting like taken out by some of the bugs and the tech issues.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen him in the Discord, but my friend Mugetsu, he noticed that when you are playing the game and say you're in a car and you're driving or whatever and you're looking and you're not looking at the NPC isn't just staring at you like deadlock, like you're not coming out off my eyes. It's like they'll look out the window, and then when they notice like you're looking at them, they'll look over at you. It's like they have like, animations like that where it feels, more realistic. And it's not just like, I don't know if you've ever played like Skyrim or anything, but you're like walk around a character and they just keep turning and like their head is just like stuck on you. It's the funniest fucking thing. And it's like you don't need to do that. But yeah, it's just small details like that really make a world feel better, like more alive. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. Peace out. Happy hunting.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to Complete Edition. If you like the content, consider supporting us on patreon.com/completion club. If you have any questions or would like to reach us, email completionclub@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Complete Edition.